my background is not within fashion. I started as a digital marketer, right? And I just applied what I saw as an opportunity and something that I'm, passionate about, sustainability, and created this platform.
What's up, captains? Today's interview with Brandon is brought to you by Fiverr, the online outsourcing platform that I personally use, as does Brandon. And I figured it was only fitting to have them as the sponsor of today's episode because he mentioned it on today's podcast that his number one biggest takeaway from Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek was to delegate and outsource. And he uses Fiverr for that. We both jokingly said on the show that right before we started recording, we had actually just gotten off of Fiverr to delegate a task to someone else, which is a super crazy coincidence. But I think you guys should do the same. If you're an entrepreneur and you feel like you don't have enough time and you're doing everything, Fiverr is a great option because one, it's free. They have the option for a paid plan, but it's free. So you don't need to pay for some other subscription service. And using the discount link that is going to be in the show notes of this podcast, you can also get 10% off of whatever you want done. And the other cool thing about Fiverr is you can literally get anything done. I've hired people to outsource my graphic design, my social media production, my podcast production. You can get people to edit your website, to type up a bio for you, like you name it, whatever it is that you're looking for can be found on Fiverr. So if you're doing a task as an entrepreneur, especially as a startup, you're probably doing a lot of things that you don't necessarily enjoy as an entrepreneur. You can outsource them on Fiverr for super cheap. Again, it's completely free to set up an account and you get 10% off of whatever task you want done using the discount link in the show notes. So don't waste any more of your time. Have somebody else do it. So click the link in the show notes and start doing. Hello, and welcome aboard another episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. This is your captain speaking, Taylor Morgan. Before we dive into today's interview, I want to remind you that this episode and this podcast in general is brought to you by the Captain's Lifestyle Program, which is my signature 90-day one-on-one lifestyle optimization course for impact-driven entrepreneurs. So if you want to look good, feel good, and perform your best so you can grow your impact, then head over to thecaptainslifestyle.com and check out what some of my former clients have to say. Now on to today's interview with Brandon Dendas. Brandon is the co-founder of IndieGetup, a fashion discovery platform that allows people to shop and discover clothing brands and products by a curated list of lifestyle and location-based categories. Their mission is to help emerging, consciously driven, and local apparel brands gain exposure and generate sales through creative digital strategies. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here, Taylor.
Sweet. So like I was mentioning before, I'm glad we finally got this thing scheduled. We went back and forth a few times because you ended up being on an RV trip, which is super cool. Way better than recording the podcast, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it was super fun, but excited to get back here, get grinding, and Yeah,
so before we get into IndieGetup, which I think is amazing, I want to briefly go into a little bit of your background because I think that's important to kind of lead up to what started IndieGetup. And I know that you come from a family of entrepreneurs. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my father owns an independent insurance agency. Started off as an independent agent and then eventually bought the company. And that was, I think, back in the 80s. So just being around that, and eventually moved into the company. We can kind of get into that story in a little bit. But it's just super inspirational to be around someone like that and, who's just unbelievably driven in his personal life and professional life. And he was kind of a lead by example guy. Like, I don't remember too many times where, I got like life lessons or kind of course corrections and stuff like that. But it's super inspirational. And to this day, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, like my dad is 100% my hero. Like he's just an awesome human being. So yeah, just to be around that is super cool.
And that's where you first got your, I guess, not really starting entrepreneurship because you're an employee, but you started working for him as a marketing strategist, correct? And you didn't really have any experience doing that.
Yeah. So, funny story. So I started out of school, went to the University of Connecticut, worked at a small marketing automation service. And it was the true kind of startup culture, working 80 hours a week. I was commuting, living at my parents' house at the time, commuting an hour back and forth. And was grinding at that job for about a year and a few months. And I remember the straw on the camel's back, or just like the last, kind of week at the business. I came home at like 6 a.m. and drove back from the agency, which is unbelievably reckless that they even let their, employees, drive back there. And my mom was having her like morning coffee. And she sees me come in and is just like absolutely blown away of like, what the hell are you doing right now? She just assumed I was like out, drinking with my buddies or something like that. She's like, what the hell is going on? I was like, I just came home from work. And she was just like, we got to figure something out for you. Like, what is going on? And it definitely was taking a toll on kind of my mental health, and was drinking a bunch. And I was living back in my hometown, so just kind of being around that environment or what have you. So my dad pitched it to me, and he's like, hey, we would love someone within marketing, because they didn't have a marketing program within the business, which is super surprising. But knowing that later, just based on the independent insurance agencies, that's not surprising. But so he just pitched it to me, and I ended up working there for the first probably 6 or 7 months. And then I eventually went fully remote, but was applying everything that I learned at that agency, which as much as the culture sucked, it was a huge learning experience for me. I did study digital marketing, but not in the way that they were kind of incorporating it in their business. It was based on a customer digital journey. So I, like, every single time that I look at a website, I'm constantly like picking apart what's, wrong, or how you can optimize it or what have you. So I was able to apply everything that I learned at that agency and applied it to their company. So so I ended up working there for about 3 to 4 years, and then stepped away and created Convertu, which is helping independent insurance agencies. But before that, that's where kind of IndieGetup came about. So we can get into that. But yeah, that's kind of the background there.
Yeah, so let's start to get into that. I know you're a big fan of Gary Vee, and you heard one of his podcasts and read his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook.
Correct.
And he's actually going to be on my podcast next year. So was hearing him and all of his infinite wisdom, was that kind of a catalyst for you to want to start your own thing?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he's 1000% the biggest inspiration for me to kind of step into the entrepreneurial journey outside of just my dad. But I feel like Gary Vee was the piece that was actually kind of vocal and, providing that course correction. So I just started listening to, it was actually a podcast, Chase Jarvis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he had Gary Vee on. It was the first time I experienced, his provocative, language, but also just like his overall, being. And I remember one thing stuck out to me, which is not even that, entrepreneurial focused, but he said, he was like, if you're a white man in America, it should be illegal to complain. And for whatever reason, I just remember taking that piece away from that podcast and like, yeah, why should I be complaining about like my current position? Why can't I step out and do my own thing and, follow my passions? And really got into that stream of listening to those podcasts. And I still have on my phone, it's hard
there
work. So yeah, I mean, just listening to Gary Vee really got the engines moving there. And my co-founder, who's a friend of mine from my hometown, we were just bouncing back, business ideas back and forth, kind of passively. I mean, there was no real strategy. Both of us were 22, 23 at the time, and we eventually landed on potentially starting our own company, but both of us didn't have experience within the fashion industry. So we really took to like Google and social media to compile a list of brands that we really aspired to be. And then within that process, we had a light bulb moment of, why did it take us 2 to 3 weeks to really compile this list, right? Why wasn't there a centralized location where you and I can go on and discover, badass brands, whether that be like innovative or even local brands within your area? So scrapped the idea for the clothing brand and started the early stages of IndieGetup.
Yeah, I love that because originally you kind of skipped past this, but you wanted to start a clothing brand. And then after some market research, you found that, okay, there's already a bunch of clothing brands. Not that you couldn't necessarily start another one, but you found this gap in the market that could lead to a much greater opportunity. And not even opportunity. I think well, you tell me, was it more that it was a better opportunity, or that you noticed that this thing was missing and it was needed in the marketplace to kind of curate all of these different things into one specific location?
Yeah, definitely noticing the gap, but also how I could step in, utilize my skills that I knew that I can apply, that I could see these companies actually utilizing.
So now let's get into what exactly IndieGetup is. So explain the whole thing.
Yeah, so it most certainly evolved from the early stages. So, the early stages, we were featuring more so Kickstarter related companies and other, Instagram lifestyle oriented brands. And within the first year or so, we featured around 100 brands. We had a goal set out to feature around 2 to 3 brands. And this was done without the brand's permission. So we would go to their social media accounts, we would gather all that information, gather those images, gather the brand background story, and then actually pitch it to the brands after to be like, hey, we have this paid model for you to get additional exposure. And it wasn't working because we didn't have traffic. So that was okay. So we kept building out the platform. But what we saw, and this was probably early 2017, 2018, was that there was a trend moving into sustainability. A lot of these companies starting off were incorporating some sort of sustainable or ethical aspect within the brand. So we had that conversation of, we are starting to feature these brands, but we also have these brands that aren't attacking this issue in an authentic manner. So we actually revamped the platform in October of 2018 to focus entirely on menswear as it pertains to sustainable and ethical clothing.
And let's just real quick go over your criteria to be included on the website, because I think that's important too. So there's a lot of greenwashing out there. Brands will, say they're eco-friendly or whatever. And I know that you have specific criteria of ethical, innovative, and local. And then you also can sort by different values on your site. So explain a little bit about that.
Totally. Yeah. And that section actually probably should be updated on the website because we really classify these brands in 2 different categories. And then it kind of, there's a bunch of categories within that. So it's sustainable and ethical. So the sustainable piece is how that brand is really approaching, their company in a sustainable way and how it affects the environment. So looking at the environmental footprint, looking at the fabrics that they use, looking at their manufacturing process, and then the ethical piece being, or the social piece being, how they treat their workers, the fair labor laws, the distribution of those wages, the environments within those manufacturing plants. So those in combination, and a lot of brands will be focused entirely on the sustainable piece, or more so on the ethical piece, and both of those we have to incorporate in our model. I would say we don't have a perfect model right now, and I can't be can't say and pinpoint, be like, this brand is the most sustainable or this brand is the most ethical, because there's so many different pieces within that. But the certifications are a great means that we utilize and that consumers can actually utilize to really, cut through the BS of greenwashing, but there's also swashing, which is social washing of these companies saying that they are, fair labor oriented, but don't necessarily follow that criteria.
Yeah. So what are some of the certifications? I know that you're part of 1% for the planet. I also recommend B Corps, which is like the highest certification of business. Anything else besides the B Corps and 1% for the planet?
Yeah, so I can actually include that if you have that in or include some sort of show notes. We have an in-depth blog of around 30 plus certifications that we incorporate in our criteria. B Corp is great. They really approach it in a holistic standpoint, but then there's also the fair labor laws and all of those certifications around that. But then there's also the environmental certification. So happy to include that blog for the listeners to go through, because that really is a great resource to vet these companies in a consumer perspective, because that is the unfortunate reality. A lot of these companies are using these sustainable terms because they can price products accordingly. Because there's research done that I think it was 7 out of 10 millennials interviewed are willing to pay extra for sustainably made products. So why wouldn't you just lie and tell the consumer that, so you can price your products that way? Yep. So the certifications are a tremendous way to do that. But then there's also a nuance to it, because you can slap on a certification on, a massive company like H&M and Zara, which are just, absolute trash companies, right? And they can have small aspects within their business that they're approaching in a sustainable or ethical standpoint. But it's just a small, Band-Aid on the massive problem that they've, most certainly caused.
Yeah, I think as long as it's better than the next brand, like Coca-Cola, for example, the world's biggest plastic polluter, if they were to become 1%, a member of 1% for the planet, and Pepsi was not, like, if you're going to get a soda, I guess at least get the Coke, because the larger their sales would be, the more percentage they would donate. Right. Obviously, that's not the best, because Coke is still, I believe, not a good brand at all. But it's always just, not everybody can be perfect. And I think that we're getting there. And when I say we, I just mean like companies and brands in general are, I think the good ones are doing the most that they can. I think other already well-established brands are doing the bare minimum to get by, to still keep maximum profits, which is unfortunate. But everybody who I talk to and everybody who I coach certainly is doing the most that they possibly can to maximize people and the planet over profits. And I think it's just a matter of time before every single business is a certified B Corp. Every single business is 1% for the planet, has all these other certifications you're talking about. And for everybody listening, the link to that blog post, like you mentioned, will be in the show notes. So you can just go down there and find it for all these other different certifications. I think one of the coolest things about IndieGetup is that you can filter by so many different, basically, categories. So run us through what some of those different categories are. And the local too, like you can shop specifically by your area, which is very cool as well.
Yeah, definitely. So the idea behind that is really dissecting what defines a brand as sustainable, because you can slap that overarching term and then you don't know, what exactly they're talking about there. So we'll get into the certifications or pinpoint the materials that they're using, if it's, upcycled or recycled. And then there's also the lifestyle aspect of it too, which really comes from the foundation of IndieGetup of, finding these cool brands that align with your lifestyle, right? So I'm really into snowboarding and, golf, as I mentioned, which we don't actually have because there's not any companies out there. So that could be a huge opportunity for possibly anyone listening here, but that we've come across. And then there's also the location piece. So we're based in Colorado. There's so many badass brands here. I would prefer to purchase from a company in Colorado versus, any other state, just based on kind of the pride here. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind all three of those categories.
Love it. Let me just real quick give a shout out to one of my personal favorite brands. He's a former client. I'm wearing his shirt right now. Puka USA founder Michael Lowther. Right now, well, actually, at the time this podcast gets released, the relaunch will probably have happened. But at the time of recording, he's not selling anything. He's just trying to get rid of old inventory, which this is one of the older designs. He's doing a relaunch with a new material, new branding, new design, things like that. But this is all 100% organic cotton, made locally in the South Orange County area, 100% made in the USA, all like the cotton was here in the USA, all USA labor, everything. He donates 5% to our local Ocean Institute in Dana Point, as well as 5% on top of that to the Wounded Warriors Project. So to learn more about him and his brand, head over to pukausa.com and check out what he's got going on. And yeah, I'm gonna hook him up with you because I think that would be a fantastic, or he would be a fantastic addition to the website. He focuses primarily on surf style apparel, athletic apparel. So yeah, let's see.
I'd love to meet him. Sounds like an awesome brand. They got a lot going for him, the sustainable aspect, but also the ethical piece. So.
Yeah. And I personally don't, if I buy clothing, which I almost never do, I hardly wear clothing as it is. This is the first time I put on a shirt today to record a podcast living in Orange County. Yeah. But yeah, if I do buy clothing, I make sure that it is sustainable in some way because I do not support fast fashion whatsoever. I'm a big fan of going to thrift shops and finding cool things at thrift shops. I like the retro designs. Like you don't need to buy everything brand new, and if you do, then make sure it's from these sustainable companies. So let's real quick talk on the importance of supporting sustainable brands, so specifically in fashion.
Yeah. I mean, that's funny that you say that. And it's, in men's fashion, particularly, we're almost by nature more sustainable. And that almost sounds kind of controversial in a sense, but
no, I agree because, women are always want the new thing, You're
right. That was the first t-shirt that you bought or whatever in the last few months, right? Yep. So we're not as much consumed by fashion. So we tend to wear out clothing a lot longer. I think there's, it's just social pressure. There's not as much social pressure on men, to have new clothing. So completely understand it in that aspect. But yeah, I mean, it's in just wearing out clothing too. And I think that's important to communicate to people because it shouldn't be the sustainable process of you stepping into sustainable fashion. Shouldn't be you wipe out your entire closet, donate that, which is great, and then buy new clothing, right? Even from these sustainable companies. The most sustainable thing you can do is wear the current shirt or the jeans or the underwear or the socks, the hat that you have on your head for as long as you can. That is the most sustainable thing. But if you do decide to buy a new piece, sustainable is the option, and you as a man can go to IndieGetup and buy those products. So I kind of forgot your initial question here, but
yeah, it was just about the importance of sustainability, but that's a fantastic point that you brought up, that even if you haven't bought sustainable in the past, like that's okay. You don't need to, throw everything away or donate it. Like just keep wearing what you have.
Yeah, and thrifting is a great option too, and that's super sustainable because you're not stepping into that new consumerism. You're staying within the cycle. You're reusing that piece. So that's crucial. We don't necessarily we haven't partnered with any brands that do any sort of thrifting per se. I mean, upcycling is, in a sense, it's not as sustainable as thrifting, but there are other companies out there that are doing tremendous things as it relates to, reselling used products. So, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Something I want to mention, and the reason why it's important to focus on sustainable materials is because if you get synthetic materials in your clothing and then you wash that clothing, microscopic little synthetic or plastic fibers get released into the wash. And then those microplastics get released obviously into the ocean, and they're all over the ocean. Like they're freaking everywhere in the ocean. They're in fish, they're in seabirds, they're in humans. There was a study that found microplastics in a human fetus. There was a study that found that humans on average eat, generally speaking, about a credit card's worth of plastic per month. Obviously, that's going to depend on where you are, what your diet consists of, specifically the quality of your diet. If you focus on poor quality foods, obviously there's going to be a bunch of plastic in there. Specifically meat. If you consume low quality meat products, like low quality hot dogs or low quality pork or low quality fish, that's probably riddled with microplastics. Just because there's hardly any regulation. The farmers don't give a shit. So always make sure you're buying the highest quality produce and meat products. But so that's why it's important to get sustainable materials, because people don't see it. Like they put a synthetic shirt in the wash and nobody would have any idea that it was secreting these little tiny microscopic fibers.
Yeah, I mean, not even the micro plastics, which is, a huge issue. But also you're breathing in that fabric, right? You're wearing that, you're consuming that, you're, when your pores open, that's, you're interacting with that fabric. So that's, another reason, if someone is actually looking at this in a health perspective, to really consider, organic cotton. Which I don't think there's, conversations about that, but, in the sustainable community, I've actually heard that, years before even, stepping into the sustainable space. But yeah, that's something else to consider as well.
Yeah. Another great point. Your skin is your body's largest organ, and it is the first defense mechanism you have. So you might think that it's not letting everything in, which it's not, but like whatever you put on your skin gets absorbed into your body. So personal care products. And I interviewed Dr. Ali Cohen on my podcast a while back. She's an expert. She's like a triple board certified rheumatologist, MD, and she's also like an environmental toxins expert. And she said that in the United States, there is absolutely zero regulation in the ingredients that are put into our personal care products, which is scary. And people don't understand that things like artificial fragrances are endocrine disruptors. Like they mess up your hormones. And especially for teenagers, like I know me in high school just spraying on the Axe body spray all over, wearing this aluminum filled deodorant and washing your hair and putting on makeup. Like, and if you don't get those things toxin free, made out of natural materials, you're rubbing that all into your body. It's causing a whole bunch of issues that manifest as stress, inflammation, brain fog, anxiety, depression, pimples, like you name it. So not related to fashion, but nevertheless, very important to consider.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's actually the direction we're moving in with IndieGetup, to incorporate consumables and cosmetics to really create that centralized location for a man to shop sustainably, not just for fashion, but the, kind of the full scope there. So important to mention that, because that most certainly is the direction we're taking the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, in addition to IndieGetup, you also have Revelfly, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's brand new, right? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So we launched Revelfly a few months ago. We've launched 3 or 4 campaigns so far. So the idea for Revelfly really started out of, we were running these giveaways within IndieGetup, put together around 50 to 60 campaigns, partnered with well over 300 to 400 brands. And during those giveaways, which kind of going through the model is, we'll put together an incredible grand prize for someone to win, collect all those emails, distribute them to the brands. But during that time, we partnered with a few environmental nonprofits. One comes to mind because we're currently partnered with them, is Plastic Tides. And we love the aspect of, creating awareness for them, giving them these emails, sending over the social media engagement, all that stuff. But we wanted to incorporate some sort of donation piece to it. And it just didn't align with what we were doing with IndieGetup. So we started it as kind of an internal project and eventually launched Revelfly, which we create incredible sweepstakes to raise awareness and donations for these environmental nonprofits. So pretty much the structure there is we'll work with a host. For example, our live giveaway that we have, if any of the listeners are interested, it's running for the next 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know when this will launch, but
yeah, this will launch, just for your information, sometime in December, probably.
Oh, okay. Got it. So you've missed that window there. But yes, well, we worked with Road Trippers, which is an iOS app around organizing road trips. And then we work with a bunch of other brand partners that will give away that grand prize. And the requirement for the brand partners is cross promotion, but then also there's a donation piece for them to participate in the giveaway. So we set the baseline price of donation of around $150. We've seen all the way up to $800 per brand to be sent to that environmental nonprofit. So that is the requirement for them to join the giveaways. Yeah.
Love it. So where can people find more about Revelfly?
Yeah, quite simply, revelfly.com. You'll see all of the live campaigns. We're actually going live with another one the following Friday. And then we're Revelfly Co. across all major social networks.
Perfect. And all this stuff will be linked in the show notes. And then tell us where we can find more about IndieGetup before we transition to another topic.
Yeah, so IndieGetup.com and then IndieGetup across all major networks.
Perfect. Now I want to pivot a little bit to just entrepreneurship and running a startup in general, because I know that you also operate a social media or a digital marketing company. And that's obviously a huge part of what you do with IndieGetup, and especially how you got started and grew your brand. So talk to us a little bit about the process of starting IndieGetup, but then basically any startup for that matter, and how to slowly start to grow your exposure and grow your brand.
Yeah, definitely. So when I started IndieGetup, I was currently working for my dad's company. Didn't really disclose that I was doing that on the side. But when I moved to Denver, it was kind of an interesting experience because I didn't really know anyone when I moved here. So I was working at coffee shops and, just spending a lot of time in kind of the learning phase and applying what I learned from the agency to that, the independent insurance agency's website and all their social accounts, but also having this discussion with my co-founder, Max, about how we can build out IndieGetup and how to start to onboard these brands. But it pretty much just started off as, and now it makes sense, and I know the term for it is a niche site. So, if any of the listeners are into SEO, that's a great way to kind of build your portfolio, is to actually create a niche site that's something that you're interested in. It could be snowboarding or, collecting cards or whatever it is, to really build out that platform. And and implement what you learn, along the way. And that's exactly what I did. I was listening to YouTube, videos, reading blogs, and just applying what I knew to IndieGetup. And with SEO, just based on kind of the structure of how to implement SEO, it happens over time. So SEO and like entrepreneurship kind of have this weird connection of, you have to put in a lot of work up front, and then later, the next 6 months to a year to 5 years, you'll reap the benefits from it.
So Are you telling me entrepreneurship isn't an instant success?
I am not, as much as that's played out on Instagram with all these dudes in Miami, posting in front of cars and stuff like that. If that's what you're into, that's fine. But yes, no, it does not happen overnight, and it's a long process. But yeah, I was able to implement everything that I knew on IndieGetup, and there was a lot of error along the way. But we were small and we're growing really slow. So learned from my mistakes, never did that again, and kept optimizing from there. So that's pretty much how I got started with IndieGetup, and really applying, because I really tell companies when we're having sales calls, like, my background is not within fashion. I started as a digital marketer, right? And I just applied what I saw as an opportunity, and something that I'm passionate about, sustainability, and created this platform. So definitely encourage anyone. I mean, even if you're not interested in SEO, it's super easy to come across this information on YouTube, or quite simply Google. And I had a digital marketing minor. They didn't teach about SEO at all. So there's just so much information out there that you can apply, and there's honestly no excuses. I think it just comes down to the drive to do it, and obviously there's risk involved. When I moved to Denver, didn't have like many friends, so I was alone for the first year or so. So you have to evaluate those risks outside of just the financial risk, which my transition was relatively. I had some cushion here and there. I didn't, take that leap of faith, which I think is interesting. And I was actually listening to a few other podcasts that you had, and a lot of people do take that, leap of faith. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of a bitch in that way. I would prefer to have like a secure net over here before taking that leap. So, however you approach it is great, but I guess that, the advice there is you don't necessarily need to jump into entrepreneurship with the deep end. You can kind of incorporate a side hustle, which, going back to Gary Vee, that's really his, his kind of communication or narrative to his audience is, go on the weekends, go, garage shopping, or incorporate something that you're passionate about. And, you can really start a business from there.
Yeah, there's two different types of people, and neither one is wrong or right. Like, it just depends on which type you are. I am much more of a burn the ships at the shore type person. Like, just fucking jump and grow wings on the way down. You'll figure it out because you'll be forced to. Some people, that does not work for them. Some people, they crash and fucking burn if they do that strategy. Right. And some people, like yourself, perform significantly better if they do the side hustle. Like, if they keep their 9-to-5 job and then they work on the evenings and on the weekends, that's totally fine. Neither one is right or wrong. It's whichever one you think is going to work best for you. So yeah, I just want to emphasize what I'm doing is not right. What you're doing is not right. It just depends. Like, everybody is so individual.
Totally.
Talk to me about what it means to you to act now and apologize later.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I mentioned that before. So any of the brands that could potentially listen to this, I was, taking that content from social and incorporating it into the website. And out of the 4 years we've been in business, there was only one time that a photographer hit us up And, it was like, you use my photo and I deserve rights to this. And it was no brainer. I was like, I took all of that risk. Of course I'll pay you. And it wasn't anything like too substantial. So, yeah, I think that's important to a degree. The whole incorporating images from social, which technically you can do, and then taking some of their content. You just have to evaluate the risk, right? You obviously don't want to do anything that's blatantly illegal that will put you in, a really, really bad situation. But if you can do it and provide value, I would strongly encourage doing it, because looking back at it, yeah, I don't think any of the companies, which were these really, really small companies, for us to utilize their, their images and content and incorporate it on the website and then be like, hey, we're creating this really, really cool marketplace. We just featured you guys. We actually ended up getting like backlinks from there. So it ended up turning into a good strategy. But yeah, I would just say it's the level of risk, definitely evaluate that. But I am most certainly like that. I think in my personal life as well, definitely take risks on a consistent basis. So yeah, that's kind of my advice there.
All right. Now to finish it up, give the listeners the most impactful takeaway that you took from the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Ooh, yes. Super inspirational. I would say outside of, listening to Gary Vee on a daily basis, Tim Ferriss is definitely, up there for inspiration. So the 4-Hour Workweek, I would say the level of outsourcing, and I do that on a daily basis. And it's crazy how many people are not aware that like Fiverr exists.
I just used it today.
Let's say I was on Fiverr, I swear to God, right before, sending out just a quick tweak on our website that I paid someone in, Bangladesh $5 to just tweak something that would take me realistically an hour to do, but I can pay someone $5 to do it.
Yeah.
So the biggest takeaway is definitely outsourcing. Definitely utilize Fiverr, and it's crazy how much you can outsource in your life to free up time for stuff that matters, because that really is the commodity that we do have is the time. And when you are scaling, it's all about processes, and that's something that I didn't necessarily evaluate in the beginning, because or when I started, because I was, a practitioner, I was the technician. I really wanted to learn the skill and be the best at it. And then, which is important, you most certainly should do that. But to scale, you have to have the processes in place. You have to outsource for that. I'm actually reading a book right now, The E-Myth. I don't know if you've ever come across that. But they have the model of, delegation is super important, and hiring, low skill workers to create, stay within the process. And that's really the scalable model. Like McDonald's, for example, as much as, that's a really shitty organization. The business model in itself, it's super, super innovative, and they're able to scale all of those stores because of that. So, so outsourcing and delegation really is the most important thing that I took away from the 4-Hour Workweek. Outside of the remote side of things, to really, you can work wherever. And it's so funny that came out. I think it was like 2008, 2009, might have been earlier than that. And, he really was the pioneer of the digital nomad. So, and it's funny to see so many people doing it now because of COVID. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome, man. It's great to have that opportunity to, what I was doing before, traveling in the Pacific Northwest for 3 weeks, and not much changed within my business. So
yeah, one of the major obstacles that a lot of entrepreneurs come to me with is lack of time, and specifically time management, because everybody in the world has time for exactly what you want to do. You always have time for your priorities. And if you don't, then it's just not your priority at the time. So a lot of people come to me with all these issues that can be solved a lot of times by outsourcing. obviously there's a lot that goes into better managing your time, which is what I'm an expert in. But I also suggest everybody to outsource exactly like how you mentioned, Fiverr, like hire employees before you think you need to. Set up these processes to where you can just delegate it to somebody else. I've been talking with a CEO of a fairly large, 7-figure a year industry, his brands, and he's the CEO and he's still going to like every single event, like staying up late at night, like doing customer service, fulfilling orders, which is great. I think the CEO should absolutely play a part in that, especially in the beginning. But you have to do the equation, like figure out how much your time is worth. And then if you could outsource it or delegate it for less than what your time is worth per hour, it should be a no-brainer. Like, do that. And then you have more time for yourself to do whatever you want to do. Spend time with your kids, go hiking, whatever. It's your time. So I just think it's crazy that so many entrepreneurs think that they have to do everything, which in the beginning, yes, you do. You have to wear all the hats. You have to be the chief everything officer. But once you get the ball rolling a little bit, that's one of the first things you should do is delegate and outsource.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it comes from, and I think most entrepreneurs are like this, is we're perfectionists. And I think it's in ego.
Which is a disease.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Totally. And you can't scale if you're a perfectionist because it's inevitably going to, there's going to be some sort of kink in the process. Right. So I think in that situation, as much as that, guy's super, super successful, it could be a level of perfectionism. Because, right. Yeah. Because based on time and
in air quotes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
successful in air quotes.
Right. But yeah, I mean, you have to be able to be okay with, stuff falling apart. And I think another piece in the 4-hour work week, I just remember something coming out where it's just like, if someone can do it 80%, the way I would do it, and then, kind of figure out that 20%, I'm fine with that. And I keep that like mentality when I'm outsourcing. If they can do 80% of it, that's 100% worth me paying them to do it, so I can allocate more time to the biz dev and stuff like that. So
yeah, I have a VA that costs like $6 an hour. And are they perfect? Absolutely not. But $6 an hour is, I'll pay that all day because my time is worth more than $6 an hour. And I don't want this to sound like derogatory towards them. Like $6 for them in their country is like a living wage. Like that is what a living wage is. It's just difference in like inflation and value. So,
right.
So yeah, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. This has been amazing. I love everything that you've built with IndieGetup. I think that's awesome that you could just go to the website and whatever it is that guys are looking for fashion wise and soon to be cosmetics wise and like skincare stuff. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you can just filter by whatever category, by your location. That's genius. So I love everything you got going on there. And again, links to everything that we mentioned will be in the show notes of this podcast. And for everybody listening, don't forget, live the captain's lifestyle.